Hi, you're listening to Thoughtful Wellness Revolution, where we believe wellness isn't wellness if it's just for you. We're your hosts, Zahra and Hien. And before we get started, please make sure to give us a 5-star rating and review. Even though we're a podcast that believes in decolonizing, we're still bound to the algorithm. So every little bit that you can help us out, we really appreciate it. And we thank you for all the support. Let's get into it. Hello, friends, and welcome to a very special episode of Thoughtful Wellness Revolution. This is normally a pop culture episode, but today is my birthday and content warning, suicidal ideation, self-harm, mental health. It's my birthday and we're talking about suicide, baby. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. This is such a weird episode to be hyped about, but here I am and here we are. Unfortunately, last week we lost another public figure, DJ Steven Twitch Boss, to suicide. If you do not know who he was a DJ who for many years was the DJ for the Ellen DeGeneres show. He was on, I don't know whether it's So You Think You Can Dance or one. Yeah. So You Think You Can Dance. He did a lot of other stuff that I actually don't know about. Hien, if you want to fill that in, if you have anything off the top of your head. Yeah, cool. But unfortunately, his wife reported, or I don't know, someone reported that he, I don't know what the correct term is here now, because we are kind of moving through what would have been quote unquote committed suicide. Died by suicide, I believe, is the proper term now, last week. And I am a person who struggles with suicidality and have for many years of my life. And I think this is an important topic. And I said to Hien, let's talk about it. And she said, LOL, I am a mental health mess, nightmare all the time too. That's not what she said to me. She is a kind, gentle soul who doesn't speak about herself like that, which is great. But she was like, let's do it. And so, yeah. Hien, what were your thoughts when you first heard about this?
Well, to be honest, when I first heard about it, I felt numb because the more I hear about public figures, celebrities dying by suicide, the more numb I become, because and it's not because like I don't have a heart and I don't care about people. It's because the conversations surrounding that make me want to go numb, because it's very people saying a lot about nothing. And it's been that way since, for years now. Like I don't want to think over all the like celebrity suicides or famous people suicides or whatever, because that's just gonna be like such a bummer. But like it's kind of the same theme. I feel like it's like somebody who people look up to with admiration and think, many of us may even be envious of the life we think they have, like their lifestyle and all their accomplishments, and for people to see someone like that like actually, I guess, like not overcome, not win in the end, it makes them say really weird things, like really pointless things. And so I feel like the last few days since I heard about his death, it hasn't really been even about him. It's like the conversation around how people talk about like suicide and depression. And so that's how I feel. I'll leave it at that for now, if you want to maybe say more about what you've been seeing people say and reactions and such.
Yeah, I as well was very disheartened by a lot of the response that was initially coming out. I saw a lot of, but he looked so happy. And I did follow him on TikTok. I mean, I guess I do technically still follow him and his wife on TikTok. And they're like, oh, but it's always the happy dancing videos and he's smiling and he has kids and he has someone who loves him. And a lot of check on your strong friends, which is one of my most hated phrases. Because a lot of people who love me have always said, oh, but you're so strong when I talk about my struggles. And it's like, cool, I'm suffering in silence and I'm screaming, throw me a life jacket. And you guys are like tapping me on the head going, you'll be fine, you won't drown. And that is obviously not a dig at anyone in my life, because I have an amazing support system at this point in my life and I have really good friends. But it is just a commentary on how we as a society deal. And I think deal is a really gross word, with people who struggle with depression and suicidality and suicidal ideation and self-harm. And so I think when people are talking about the loss of someone to suicide, the conversation, like you said, it's a lot of platitudes. It's a lot of like, oh, we're gonna miss your smile and we wish you could have been happy and we wanted you around, or whatever it is. But it's like the thing is when those people, and by those people I mean me, and other people, like all of us, when people are talking about struggling, you're met in society and from other people, from people you know well and people who love you and mean well, and people who don't fucking know you and don't mean well and don't know any better. There becomes an instant creation of a divide. I haven't seen a lot of, now I have, because I follow apparently a lot of people who struggle with suicidality, but seeing a lot of people, sorry, I got distracted. But it's creating like a divide of like an us versus them. And I think a lot of people, that happens with when they bring up that they have suicidal ideation or any experience with like depression and like mental health, it becomes I can't understand that, and I don't even know if it's a real thing almost. And if you have not experienced depression, please count yourself lucky, because those of us, you don't understand what it's like. A lot of people understand what it's like to live your life trying to protect yourself from something that wants you not to be alive and thriving. We live under capitalism. It happens every day. But a lot of people don't understand what it's like to be fighting for your life against yourself. I think, yeah, that's a very misunderstood concept that creates a lot of division. And I think that it reminds me a lot of the way people talk and think about disability and chronic illness, and depression is a chronic illness. It is a disability, where people want to believe it can't happen to me. So if I like acknowledge it or empathize with it or try to understand it in any means, I'm opening myself up to it. And it's like those casual thoughts, I don't know if they're everyone's casual thoughts, but they're like casual thoughts of like, oh, I wish I got into a car accident and I didn't have to deal with this anymore. Or like, if someone would just like murder me, it'd be fine. Or like that casual shit, like that's suicidal ideation, my friends. It doesn't just come in the form of like, and there's like, I wish I didn't wake up, I wish I didn't have to deal with it. Like it's casual. And I'm sure most people have experienced something along that line, more people than they would like to admit. Yeah, Hien, do you have much to say about how people have been talking about suicide in the news lately?
Well, I kind of feel like it's interesting because maybe I'm lucky that my algorithm and feed tends towards people who are more critical of the responses, or, you know, adding different perspectives to the responses versus then like just the usual platitudes. But, you know, I've been seeing people talk about how like the saying of like check on your strong friends isn't enough, because a lot of times your supposedly strong friends, if we're going to call it that, they will come off strong because you don't know how to act when they are honest and vulnerable with you. And so that's kind of what I've been seeing, you know, where people are kind of like, oh, please stop just going around saying check on your strong friends, and then like, you know, maybe sharing like one hotline number kind of thing, like, and thinking like, oh gosh, I'm good, right? Like this is it, right? Because it is of course more nuanced and complicated than that. And it's not bad to share resources, but it just really makes me think about how like a lot of people are not, I guess, skilled enough to just even sit with someone when they're not feeling good. And so I think about it, gosh, and I just want to say you're so real for sharing those examples of like the casual suicide stuff, because I'm like, oh shit, that's me. I think like that all the time, but like I don't even consider that like suicidality or ideation, because I'm like, oh, that's just part of like the fabric of my brain. I think about that, like I was just like all the time. So I just think it's really funny, and I just want people to know, like, don't be worried. I'm very well resourced in terms of like mental health support right now in my life. But definitely I have felt times with my mental health struggles, how hard it is just to get someone to like listen to you and not feel like you have to spin. I always feel like if I'm going to share that I'm not feeling good, it's going to make the other person so uncomfortable that I have to spin it out to be something positive, or like that it's not as bad. And I wonder, like, gosh, how many of us are dealing with that right now, because we can't, for some reason, just sit with each other and be with each other when someone says like, I'm not feeling good right now. Like, I'm very deeply unhappy right now. I don't want to be here right now. Like, just to like take that in. And a lot of people just can't, like, they don't have the skills, or they don't have the capacity. It might be because for themselves, they don't have the capacity to hold that for themselves, right? And so that's just some of the things I've kind of been seeing and been thinking about, is like, yeah, it's not really helpful to just check on your strong friend if when they try to be honest with you, you get uncomfortable and make them feel bad for having feelings at all, for struggling. And I don't think people are like malicious. I don't think people intend to make their strong friends feel bad, but it's just like, I guess that's what I would say. It's like lack of skills and lack of resources to actually help people be more like, people being all of us, we just be more equipped with like handling hard feelings, because we don't live in a society that seems to want to care for our well-being. That's my take.
Yeah, that's an excellent take, and I agree with so much of what you said. And I do think it really comes down to, I want to not harp, but like second, like agree with, I'm losing words. I want to agree with that point, that it is truly like, not that I don't think people are malicious. And I have had so many friends who mean well, who have left me feeling isolated and alone in those spaces. Cause like you said, you do feel like I mean, I don't want to be here, but it's fine. I'm fine. Everything's going to be fine. And it's like, so that they feel uncomfortable. And I think because this is something I've really been working on, and something I'll share it in a minute. But I think it really comes down to regulation. You know what I mean? Like, we talk a lot about, oh, check on your strong friends. And it's like, no, learn to stay regulated. So when your strong, quote unquote, friend tells you, I don't want to be here right now, life is feeling overwhelming and too hard, your body doesn't go into panic. Because I think that's what we do, is in a way to avoid the panic, we're just like, you'll be fine, or it's not that bad, or do you have a therapist? That's a good question to ask, but not in a panicked way. That doesn't make anyone feel reassured about their feelings, because I suicidal thoughts are more common than a lot of us realize. Like not wanting to be here, feeling like, especially when we live under capitalism, and it is just so exhausting and draining every day to be like, are we just living here to work and pay bills so that Elon Musk can be a dum-dum on Twitter? Like, was this what we're doing? It's hard to be like, what how do we go on? And then there are those of us with depression and other issues that affect us that are making that come up in stronger ways, right? I think it's more of a spectrum, and I think we need to stop with the divisiveness of us versus them, of like, these are people with suicidal ideation or suicide problems, and these are people who never have them. So yeah, but back to what you were saying with, I don't think anyone's trying to be malicious, but it is like trying to build the space for people to be all of who they are, because what I said to you when we were filling out the outline for this episode was, depression is not being a sad boy in the corner, which you really enjoyed. Because so much of what I saw, not so much, because I do have my algorithm geared towards people who are giving good responses, but a lot of the initial responses I saw were like, he was so happy, or I just watched that video. And this is where I want to be a bit personal. I have struggled with suicidal ideation for like 20 years, if I am being very honest. And people call me an optimist all the time. You're so happy, you're so resilient, you're so strong, you're so funny. Which like boosts my self-confidence, baby. I'm here for that. But also a lot of people don't see the moments in which I am absolutely shattered and wondering, do I even deserve to be here? And I did not know that I intended on sharing this on the podcast, but it does feel relevant to say that the day like literally 2 minutes before my therapy session, I found out about the death of DJ Steven Twitch Boss. And that was 2 minutes before I was going into a therapy session to talk to my therapist about creating what is called a safety plan. For any of you babies out here who don't know what that is, a safe, and not babies in a derogatory way, but babies as in like my babies. For any of you who don't know what a safety plan is, it is a plan you make with yourself, a mental health professional, other people, to keep yourself safe in the event of strong suicidal ideation, tendencies, desires for self-harm. And my therapist and I made it more of like as an aftermath for a situation that I was having the weekend prior. And then she was like, okay, well, like, what are all the things you did, to keep you moving? And like, we'll make that into a safety plan so that if that comes up again, what to do. And I'm at the point where I am well-resourced and I do have the tools and capacity and the support system. Cause like, as soon as I started feeling that way, I knew exactly what to do. I knew exactly who to reach out to and what to do. And that has taken a long fucking time. And I fucking hate talking about vulnerable shit on the podcast, but I love it because I think it is important. But yeah, so it is to say, I look happy and I am happy. I am the most happy I have been in many years, probably 20 years. Like, I feel good. My life is good. And I'm still making a safety plan because, hey man, sometimes those things just happen to people. Like, you can have a brain like that, and that is okay. It doesn't make you a them or an us where you can't fit in. And, I think a big thing for me specifically has been learning how to talk to the people in my life about it without the reframe of like, but I'm okay, it's fine, everything's gonna be fine, we're all good. Because I am very good at that. And then I fall apart in public or in private, and I'm like, nobody loves me and I'm unlovable. And it's like, okay, well, then maybe tell your friends who are genuinely trying to help you what you're actually feeling. And that's not a call on anyone else. That was like a me thing, because I do think in society we don't know how to talk about it. Um, and now that I am going to have a vulnerability hangover for the next 9 million years, Hien, what do you have to say about depression not being about being a sad boy in the corner?
Well, first, Zara, I just want to say, like, thank you for sharing about that and even sharing about the safety plan thing, because I guess now it's my turn to be vulnerable and share about my mental health journey a little bit. I actually haven't heard that term. I feel like that's something that I worked on in therapy, but I don't think I've heard it said that way, of like the safety plan. I think I've heard it more like, oh, you know, like more casually, like, do you know what to do when you're feeling like really down and you're really spiraling and you're wanting to die, kind of thing. I'm like kind of paraphrasing. So I just want to say thank you for, like, you know, educating us on that. Because now I feel like when I'm really, really down, I can talk to my therapist about, like, hey, help me figure out my safety plan a little bit more. But yeah, I'm trying to think about my own suicide ideation, because I definitely have had experienced that. I think still do on like the casual level. And I definitely think, you know, you said earlier, Zara, about it being more like a spectrum, not just like either or. Like you're either suicidal or you're not. And then if you are, then like you're outcast almost, or like that's where the strong people suffer, because they have to pretend like, oh, I'm fine. It's like, no, I'm not really fine, but like they have to kind of reframe it. Otherwise, everyone else who has never experienced suicide ideation will get like uncomfortable. And so I'm glad you said that, because I kind of feel like that is how I see my own like mental health journey, in that like when I was younger, I don't know, close to 10 years ago, like I was at my lowest point in terms of like mental health and feeling very suicidal. And I remember feeling very like, even though I like went to a therapist and everything, I felt like I didn't have like a strong support group of like people in my life who really understood what was going on. And that was when I felt very much the them versus us. It's like, oh my God, everyone else around me is like so normal in like a good way. Like I like it was very much like, I wish I could be like these people who like never seem to never have this problem, and they all seem to be doing so well. I now see that they have just like weird maladaptive coping mechanisms, you know, to like not feel like I realize that now. But back then I was like, oh my goodness, like there's just something so wrong with me. And I just feel like, you know, my sense of self-worth was like so low, because I felt like I'm struggling with such big feelings and I'm wanting to die, and everyone else is just cool. And that was really hard for me. I think when I kind of overcame that part of my life with the help of like therapists and such, I think what it came down to was to give myself credit of like, okay, I may want to die today, but hey, I didn't. Or like last week I really wanted to die, but I'm still here. And being just a little bit more, not a little bit more, it required a lot of self-compassion, which, you know, if you know me, you know, I'm very passionate about that. And that really helped me. But that wasn't necessarily something that I learned in therapy or from my friends and family at the point. It was just something that I think I was just super lucky to come across the resource and like the practices to be more self-compassionate, because that helped. That is probably the thing that like, it's probably why I'm still alive. It's just like understanding and trying to cultivate self-compassion in my life. And now I don't think of myself necessarily. I mean, I guess if we were to talk about them versus us, kind of either you're suicidal or you're not. I mean, I might say I'm not suicidal in the sense of like, you know, it's not like I'm in crisis all the time. I guess that's what I would say. But like, I try to be honest with myself when I do feel like I want to die, which is a lot. Like, I don't necessarily tell my friends all that. But like, for instance, I tell my boyfriend that a lot. Sometimes I'll just be like, I hate it here. I want to end it all. And I always use the emoji of the face as kind of like the pleading face with like the squirt gun emoji. Like I often do that. And that is just my way to express like, this is just how I feel right now. And I guess just being able to say that, even though it's such like a small thing, but I feel like being able to express that and him not trying to like reframe it for me of like, you shouldn't feel that way, or like, what's wrong? And like, because you know, sometimes it's like, if you tell a friend sometimes, and it's like usually a well-meaning friend, that you're not feeling okay or feeling down, it's almost like you then have to comfort them for their reaction. And it's like, okay, now this is not about me anymore. Now it's about you. And now I need to make you feel less worried about me, which is totally not helpful. But I guess what I'm saying is like, I think of myself as someone who like has those casual thoughts, and just being able to express that with like a trusted person in my life and not being told like there's something wrong with you. That makes me feel actually a lot better, and not needing like, I don't have to go through with it. And I know I'm okay, because if I'm willing to tell you, I hate it here, I want to die, I want to end it all, then at least I'm telling you instead of scheming and planning how to do it. And at least I am reaching out to you and kind of making connection, like a bid for connection, versus stonewalling and like isolating myself. But it's interesting because I will say, like, the other thing I will say is that in the past, and this really was like a hard point in our relationship, I had an ex-boyfriend. I would say that too sometimes, or not say that too, but like not exactly those words, but I would express kind of like my casual suicide ideation. And he was like, please don't do that, because I myself tried to commit suicide in the past, and like it's so triggering for me. Like I can't listen. And it was just interesting. It's like, oh, so you're someone who's gone through deep depression, but for some reason you can't hold space for someone else who's struggling and just wants to like just express it to you. We're not together anymore, you know, but it's just kind of interesting to think like, I don't know, just how that can be sometimes, of like, oh, so then I guess his expectation is that I keep it to myself or talk to my therapist, which, you know, I do, but like that I like can't share anything other than I'm so happy to be alive and I just want to be alive all the time. It's like, no, sometimes I don't. Sometimes I wake up and I'm like, ugh, I woke up again, you know? And I just want to be able to like be real with that and express that. And I guess like in the process of being able to share that, I find so much more healing and helpful than the other shit of like having to reframe it, or like being told I can't talk about that at all, which it's like counterintuitive now I think about it, for someone like him to tell me that. Who's a white man too. I'll just keep it at that. So I'll bring it back to Zahra now, if you have anything you want to say in response.
Yes, I have so much to say in response. First and foremost, I want to say thank you for bringing it back to self-compassion, because self-compassion and really building my zone of tolerance, like my window of tolerance, and my ability to regulate has been a thing that's improved my life vastly over the last year. And I want to also mention something about self-worth and how you talked about how that really improved things for you as well, because my therapist was talking to me last session about this, obviously. Also, I do want to add, for anyone listening to this podcast, Hien and I are well-resourced mental health wise, in support and stuff, and don't feel like we're on the edge of ending our lives. And that's why we feel safe talking about all this with everyone. So please don't report us like we are okay. I mean, we wouldn't be talking about this so candidly in this way if we did not have the support.
And I think I want to say, though, that is one thing that's also hard for people who may have these thoughts, is because how harmful is it to be then reported and taken away from, you know, like taken away from your own life and resources, if you were to dare say to like the wrong person who takes it the wrong way that, oh, I'm having suicide ideation, right? So I just want to also put that out there. That makes it hard for people to get the support they need.
Absolutely. And I will just share a quick story of that did happen to me in middle school, as I was self-harming, and I had friends who found out, who obviously they were children and we didn't have the resources then to deal with this, and they wouldn't have had them now either, you know what I mean? And they reported me to school, and the school is basically like, admit you're doing it for attention, or we're going to have to put you in a mental, we're going to have to Baker Act you, like, and put you under a psychiatric observation for 72 hours. And I was like, well, I'm obviously not going to do that. So I guess I'm doing it for attention, which is just like a wild way to handle any sort of mental health crisis, which again makes you feel like you're an outsider and doesn't add to the self-worth of the conversation, because then you're like, oh my God, I'm doing this for attention. What is wrong with me? You know? But I really do want to bring it back to what you were talking about self-worth, because my therapist and I were talking, and she was like, I need you to understand that it makes sense to your brain that you would go to suicidal ideation, because when you're in that space where you're really depressed and your brain isn't talking to each other correctly, right? Your brainstem, your like amygdala, your prefrontal cortex, they're not all communicating. So but your brain is trying to make sense of stuff. So like your amygdala, that's the one at the base, right? I'm pretty sure it's your amygdala. That's your brainstem. So your brainstem, I know where it is in the brain. I can't remember the proper name for it. So the brainstem, right? That's where that's the first part of your brain that develops till age 7. And that's all your like primary animalistic stuff. Then you have your limbic system that develops, and then you have your prefrontal cortex. But when your brainstem, when you are in this state of feeling depressed and feeling suicidal or having suicidal ideation of some level, your brainstem is going, I'm in danger, I'm in danger, I'm in danger, right? And it's thinking there's something wrong. And it's also going, I don't have any self-worth, like I'm not worth anything. And so your prefrontal cortex is actually trying to make sense of what that message means. And so your brain is putting out this message of like, no, like when you're in that space, feel like you have no self-worth and you have no value. And so my therapist was like, what is no self-worth plus no value? And I was like, no life. Like, if you don't feel like you have any worth and you don't feel like you have any value, the rational prefrontal cortex part of your brain is going to be telling you, of course, I shouldn't be alive. Like, why would anyone who has no purpose and no value and no worth be alive? So that is like your brain trying to make sense of like the panic and the situation going on. Not saying that that makes it any easier, but it did really help me to be like, oh, like, of course my brain goes there. That's what makes logical sense to it. And it is just like holding space to find regulation within that, and whether that's like distracting yourself. So I will name a couple of the things that are on my safety plan. I'm actually embarrassingly going to pull it up because that's who I am. But I know one of them was playing on my Switch, like playing a video game of a turf who will not be mentioned, that I will not buy new versions of, and I feel embarrassed to own, but I own it, and it does keep me from wanting to kill myself, so I'm going to use it. And oh my God, there's so many fucking messages. I stopped checking my email in 2022, so this is taking more longer than I expected. Okay, so one of them was playing my Switch, making sure I drink water and eat food. This is a big one for me, is making a future plan, whether it's like to have a phone call with someone on Monday, go somewhere, and like something that I can plan for that's in the future. Painting my nails. I played with kinetic sand a lot. Anything I can do with my hands that's tactile to kind of help my brain stay calm. Taking care of my dog, taking my dog out. So like, figure out a list for you. It's not like, and so this is also, and it's like a big piece of it is regulation, right? When in those moments, and I'm not saying like that's the one solution to this problem, and if everyone just gets regulated, it'll go away. But it does help give you more space and freedom in those moments to kind of be aware of what's going on, as opposed to being stuck in it. And as someone who has, again, for 20 years been dealing with this, to finally feel like I have a bit of something is helpful. And that leads me back to when people can't talk to you and can't, like when people can't hold space for your feelings, like it's the co-regulation piece. Because how, like, I think about kids all the time, and like, okay, like when a kid is having a big feeling, if you tell that kid, hey, shut the fuck up and stop being upset that your crown broke, does that stop it, or does it make it worse? And if they do stop crying, they're not happy. We now know through lots of research that that child is shutting down inside and learning they have no self-worth, and they're learning to regulate in that way where it's like, I'm not worthy, you know. It's like, and that's like one specific message. I'm not saying that's it for everyone, but it isn't teaching them like, okay, this is a big feeling and I can manage this big feeling and move through it. It's like, when you have those big feelings, you're wrong, you're bad, you don't belong. And like, those, my friends, are the very same patterns and feelings that lead to people with suicidal ideation and depression and self-harm thoughts to lead to those actions, because we don't feel like it's okay to feel like that. And so instead, if someone shares with you big feelings, take a deep breath and just don't be so quick to say, let's fix it, let's do something about it. And just say like, I'm truly sorry that you're experiencing that right now. Or I'm here with you, you know? Like, there are so many little things you can say to someone, but I think, you know, regulation is a big piece of it. And I do want to touch on your ex-boyfriend story. Sorry, I know I'm going through a lot of things here right now, but because it leads us back into the next point we wanted to talk about, which is like how mental health and depression and suicide affects men. And I think that comes from, as a society, we've told men that they don't have feelings, they're not allowed to have feelings, so they don't have the capacity to hold space for their own feelings, let alone other people's feelings. And it just makes me think so much of your ex-boyfriend, who's like, inability to hold space for his own feelings about suicide, because someone definitely told that kid, hey, this is fucking bad, don't do this, you're not allowed to feel this way. And he was like, I don't feel that way anymore, you're not allowed to feel that way because then it makes me feel that way. And it's like, maybe go to therapy, dude, I don't fucking know.
No, that's the okay. So I just want to say, what's really fucking wild about this ex-boyfriend story I just brought up is that he actually, and it's like really weird, I'm sure you could analyze it on many levels, but like, he actually comes off as like the soft, sensitive boy type. That's like the really weird thing, is like, he doesn't come off, and his style as a person is not like the hyper masculine dude. He does come off very much like sensitive, nerdy, I'm a boy and with feelings kind of type. But also it's very much like platitude. Like, he's very shallow, because like he'll talk about his own mental health experiences and then he'll be like, he is the type of person to say, check on your strong friends. He is the type of person to put out a post linking to like, a crisis hotline. That's the kind of person he is. But anything deeper, so, the type of conversation we've been having where people are pushing back against the notion of like, oh, just go check on your strong friends, right? He's very much that kind of person though. And it's just kind of like, it's just interesting still, because I think he probably thinks of himself as more evolved than some men, like, the hyper masculine broadcasters who's like, I don't believe in mental health problems, like, just go work out. Like, that's kind of like the toxic masculinity thing, is like, oh, just go work out or drink some beer and you're fine, or what, again, like maladaptive coping mechanisms, right? So he isn't that kind of person, but he is very much like the very shallow way of like thinking about mental health, which is just really interesting, like, because there's like so many contradictions there.
I find that so fascinating, because to experience an issue and have no capacity to hold space for another person experiencing the same thing. I know men do it every day, all the goddamn time, but I don't understand it. And it does really make me think that we've raised a whole several generation of men not capable, not understanding. I don't want to say capable, because that is prescribing something, but I'm not sure they're able to, or
they haven't like practiced their capacity.
Yeah, they haven't practiced the capacity for empathy.
Gotten time to gain the skills to increase the capacity.
Yes. Yeah. So like, and that's it. And so it's like the problem doesn't extend to anyone outside themselves. And fuck, I wish sometimes I write down the name of creators on TikTok when they say something really good, or I'll send you the video, but I did not. So if I remember, if I find it, or if someone listening knows who this is, go ahead and tag them, please. But they were talking about how men have the capacity to deal with marginalization so long as it affects them and not any further. Where it is like, if you think about Hassan Minhaj, and how he, champions a lot of South Asian issues that people aren't talking about. Like he talked about like Modi, and he talked about other things that people are not talking about. And yet, if you Google his name and South Asian women, a lot of women who worked with him didn't have great things to say about him. And it's like, oh, okay, so the issue extends, like you don't see how it affects women. Like there is not, and this isn't like a men hate women, but it is like I do think it's a thing we have socialized men not to do, to understand the nuance and complexity of an issue extending to someone who doesn't include them. And a lot of cases that is women, because patriarchy. I could get into a longer explanation. Yeah.
I mean, I think you're absolutely right about it, and it's just very interesting. Like I think about it, I'm like, that's really weird. Like I should have broken up with him then. But I think that was also at a time in my life where I did also, not just because of him, but because of other people, felt like I needed to try to reframe kind of my feelings, right? Of like, oh, well, I guess it's really not that bad. Like maybe he's right. Like if it's really that bad, I shouldn't just talk about it so casually, even though I just told everyone earlier, like 10, 20 minutes earlier, that like, actually, I do find it helpful to be able to express myself. Because again, if I'm telling you this to you, that I'm feeling this way, that's at least me connecting with you instead of isolating and doing it, right? Like saying, I want to die is so much more, to me, helpful than actually going and trying to die. That's like my personal experiences with it. And being able to not have someone freak out at me or calling me insensitive to their own like suicide ideation or like attempts in the past, like, it's just interesting that he like lacks so much compassion. And I think about it, he was such like a performative male feminist type of guy. I mean, that's what it comes down to, is men co-op like women's liberation ideals. And it's kind of like that the last podcast we talked about, right? It's like they co-opt the language around it. But yeah, I'll just leave it at that. I don't know if there was anything else you wanted to say, because I don't remember what else I wanted to say at this moment.
Yeah, I do want to talk about a bit more about mental health for men, specifically Black men and men of color. But first, I need to share a funny thing about men, which is like just a silly anecdote, where I commented under a TikTok video the other day, and it did pretty well. Like I got like 100 plus people liked it. And I've never commented anything where so many men liked it. And it was like innocuous. It wasn't about anything like it was about like Avatar the movie. It wasn't about anything like related to sex and gender, social justice or anything. And so many men liked it. And I was like, oh no, do I need to delete this comment? Because too many men are agreeing with it. Sorry, everyone. I don't hate men. I just genuinely worry when a bunch of them agree with me. You guys have not proven yourselves well this year. Sorry, I'm just going to say it like it is. Let's talk about fucking Adam Lambert, Prince Andrew, 9,000 other men I don't need to name because we already know they're trash.
King Charles,
fucking
of course.
Lanes.
King Charles.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Oh, Elon. Kanye.
Yeah, just garbage monsters all around, man. You guys gotta fucking get it together. But contextually, we don't actually hate men on this podcast. We just do like to joke about it because you make it so fucking easy. But I do think, as we were talking about before, mental health really does affect men in a way that, because of patriarchy, men are not allowed to express their emotions. They're not they've not been taught to have the capacity to hold their own emotions, let alone that of other people. And I will say a lot of the people who I did see write things about Twitch that were like so positive, man, were men. Because he seems happy. But I do think specifically around Twitch, as he was a very outwardly facing, quote unquote, happy person and a Black man, I do think it is important to talk about the way mental health and depression affects Black men and men of color, who specifically Black men are not parentified, like adultified as young boys. So it's like an 8-year-old Black boy is seen as a man, charged as an adult. Of course, that little boy is not going to feel safe to say, I'm feeling sad. I read the saddest comment on Reddit that was like, when I was a little boy, I was writing a suicide letter. My mom found the beginning of it, and I was talking about how I was depressed and I wasn't allowed to be because Black people don't get depressed. And my mom and my stepdad made fun of me for 6 months about it. And I understand there's a lot of nuance in that conversation that isn't for me to like discuss and understand, but I do want to say, like, these are people's experience. Like, this is a real experience someone had where I don't feel even safe to tell my parents, you know, because I mean, I grew up, I don't know if you grew up this way, but like my parents were like, depression is a white American person thing. This is not a thing you have.
Oh my gosh, Zahra, I was like thinking about just the conversation we were having. At points, I did think about how my own family thinks of mental health and depression. And I didn't want to go there because, and I don't mind that we're going there now, but I didn't want to go there because they're just so harmful. They were so harmful, are still harmful, their views on mental health, mental illness, depression, that I was like, I don't even want to go there because it's like, well, of course I had all the problems I had growing up with parents like that. Like,
I am not joking. When I was out of town once, my dad installed lights in my home that, I mean, they are insane fluorescent bulbs. Anyone who comes to my house is like, these are too bright. Why do you have these? And my dad put them in because he said, the bright lights will keep you from getting depressed. Lots of windows, lots of lighting is going to keep you from getting depressed. And it's like, I appreciate, and this was like many years of battling depression at this point. You know what I mean? It wasn't like it was the first time and he was just like, I'll get her lights. It will be good. It was many years of saying this isn't a thing. And eventually come to the point of like, well, we can fix it with the lights. And it's like, you're genuinely really trying, and I appreciate that, but there are a lot of other things you're doing that are deeply harmful to this situation that are not helping, and I don't know that the lights actually help that much at the end of the day. So it's like we come from these cultures, we come from different backgrounds where therapy is thought of as a white American thing. It's not for us, quote unquote. It's for lazy people, it's for rich people, it's for weak people, you know? And these are a lot of, and all of these, you won't be able to hear the air quotes that I put around all of those words, I'm realizing now, but I did put air quotes around all of those terms because those are not real things in regards to mental health. Lazy also doesn't exist. Dr. Devin Price wrote a book about it. It's called Laziness Doesn't Exist, Does Not Exist. Check it out. But we talk about not having a safe space, and I think it's even worse for men because I don't know a lot of men who talk to their guy friends about mental health or about feeling sad or like, and I think it's getting better now. I genuinely think there is more space for there is more space for these conversations, but with the stereotypes of Black men being aggressive, or I don't know, I think about how South Asian men a lot of times are called creepy. oh, this creepy Indian guy in my DMs, you know, where it's like those, if you're constantly being told that there's something wrong with you for expressing any level of emotion, what makes you think that when someone like DJ Twitch was experiencing mental health, he would have felt safe talking to the outside world about it? It's, I gotta keep dancing, I gotta keep smiling, I gotta keep moving, because then people will still accept me. But other than that, people will vilify me, put me in the corner, say that I'm not a man, which is such a fucking harmful statement. Yeah, I don't know. Hien, do you have anything to say about mental health and Black men and men of color?
Yeah, I feel as if something I've observed with, I guess, more generally speaking, like people of color cultures and mental health, is that I think sometimes the parents will not, they might see what is a problem, but then they'll say that that isn't their people's problem. It's like white people's problem, or it's just like, that's just not our problem. Or if it is a problem, then, it's like something that we'll try to fix with, like you said, either lights or like just get on medication. That's it, right? Or what, like something like the quick fix kind of behavior. Yes. I think they do that thinking that from their point of view, I feel as if they mean it to be empowering for us, the people suffering. Like, I think in their minds, it's like, oh, like if we just try to fix the problem fast or say there's no problem, then there's no problem. You're strong enough, right? You're strong enough to just not have obstacles in life because of your mental health. Like, they think of it like that, but then it's like the opposite is true, where it's like, no, it's actually really harmful that you're not giving me the resources and help, that you're not willing to expand your capacity to hold feelings for me, because you're thinking that I could just be, quote, strong or normal, I'm doing air quotes, like like other people, but that's just not the reality. And you're actually harming me by not like accepting the truth or like seeing reality for what it is. And so I kind of see it like that, where it's like, I think they mean well. I think they mean well to say like, oh, that's not a problem for you. That's not the problem for us and people like us. But it's like, no, it is. And you're making it worse. Like, thanks for perpetuating trauma for me, even though you're trying to tell me I can like brush past it. It's like, it's not like that.
You mean the bootstraps methodology, but for mental health?
Yeah, right. That's exactly it though. Like, that shit is just so real. Just from knowing different friends of colors and like just different cultures from people of color that I've befriended, and hearing about their own mental health and what their family thinks. That's like the general theme that I've seen, is like bootstraps mentality, but for mental health, thinking that it's empowering, but actually super harmful.
And yes, absolutely, that's it. And I do want to add that a lot of specifically immigrant cultures have this ideal and sort of like path to dealing with mental health. And I recognize that a lot of it is from situations where they were in survival mode, where it was like, well, if you don't find a way to keep going, you will actually die. Which is like, obviously, of course, true here and everywhere, but it's almost like, and this is where I struggle, where people say, oh, we have the privilege to be depressed and think about our mental health. Because it is a privilege where, I mean, my dad remembers when he moved into a building with running water, like, I understand I have an immense privilege. And I recognize that it wouldn't have been accessible to them necessarily to have the skills and the things surrounding mental health. We also just like didn't know about it then. So who's to say if they had the information to it that they wouldn't also have been like, oh yeah, I might be struggling with poverty, but I'm also, clinically depressed. So that part of it makes me wonder. And then I don't know, I recognize it and I feel empathy and sympathy towards that reality, that it is a privilege. And then I also feel like, I don't know, man, doesn't feel like a privilege to be like, please don't fucking blow your brains out.
No, I get you on that. And it's interesting because the way I see it is I just see it as trauma. I mean, okay, they might not have said I have PTSD or that they are depressed or anxious. They may not use those words, but like that doesn't mean it's not that. Like it doesn't mean that their nervous systems have been so like dysregulated for so long, you know? Like it doesn't mean that just because there wasn't a word or understanding or framework doesn't mean it wasn't what it was. And I think like a lot of, I'm thinking for my own family and probably other immigrant families, it's like I think there's like the level of just like really high coping skills and like survival skills of just coping. It's like and so but it's still like trauma. Like I still like I think about like my mom and my grandparents and like my mom's siblings, like my aunts and stuff, and like they probably all have CPTSD. They wouldn't ever go get that diagnosed or think about it, but like I mean, how could you not if you like live through poverty and war and like were so fearful of your life and then like became refugees and like moved countries just like that? Like how could there not be trauma? You know, and I think like there is, but it's just like the way they learn to deal with it is different than how we're dealing with our own traumas that come up from like being in a, I guess, more privileged world, you can say. But like to me, it's like trauma is trauma. That's just kind of how I think about it. And so, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and also I think it's become your trauma response has become so ingrained at those points, you know what I mean? Where it is like, no, this is just how you deal with it. And it's like, no, baby, that's a trauma response. You don't need to hoard every single plastic bag you've ever come across in your entire life and keep them under the kitchen sink. I understand that we can reuse them, but also you get 5 every time you go to the grocery store. I live in Florida, man. We have a plastic problem here. I don't want to talk about it, but you get what I mean. Is like that, like to some extent, that trauma response of holding on to all those plastic bags is good because like a lot of us know you can reduce, reuse, recycle. You can use them as trash bags. You can put stuff in them. You can carry stuff, blah, 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 blah. But at a certain point, it's like, okay, do I need to hold on to all of these? Or is this just such an ingrained trauma response that I won't be able to get any later? So I need to like, it's hoarding, you know what I mean? Like immigrant people fucking hoard shit because you grew up not knowing where the stuff was going to come. So you're like, okay, I guess we'll keep these 15 empty shortbread containers and one of them will be a sewing kit and one of them will have bills in it and one of them, you know what I mean? One of them.
No, I know what you mean. That is
crayons.
so funny. It's like universal, keeping the shortbread containers.
Yeah, Royal
to put
Dance,
in your random shit. Yeah,
Mhm.
to put in the sewing supplies and then other random shit. No, that's like so real. I think that's so funny.
Yeah,
like
it across cultures.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And so I don't know. I don't know where you want to go from here. I kind of feel like I feel like there is no solution and a bunch of solutions, if that makes sense. In the sense where, I mean, like, we're not here trying to say we're going to fix suicide, you know, but it's kind of like, I see so many possibilities of how things could get better in terms of like how we talk about mental health and how we lend support for each other. But then I also see like, given the world we live in, like, it's probably more likely none of this is going to change or that the change is going to go super slow because I'm only starting to see the talk about how we talk about people who like, you know, DJ Twitch suicide, like how we talk about it afterwards. This is the first time I'm seeing that conversation. Not that it wasn't happening before, but this is where it's like I'm more aware of the conversations where it's like kind of pushing back like that. Oh, he was so happy and like he was married and he had kids or, you know, whatever. And it kind of makes me kind of like, I don't know. I don't know how you like it's good and bad.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I thought I didn't unmute myself. Doing good, everyone. Yeah, no, I'm gonna give myself a second and remember what you said. Yes. Okay. Sorry. I do think there is some pushback happening in these conversations, or it is changing the conversation. And I don't think it's about like, I want to use that Jamaica quote from the episode where she says, I'm really just pulling all the quotes today and I'm like going through notes to do so. I didn't use my notes for literally every single thing I do. I think a lot of it is like this. It's not that people are denying there's a problem. I think we all agree that there's some sort of problem. The exact root cause of that problem and how to fix it is where we differ. And it's okay to differ in plans, because there are different ways. There's many different ways as there are people to solve the problem. And I think it's not about the one solution. But I do think a big part of it is having people like us, people who actually deal with these issues publicly, regularly, not that one time when that one guy broke up with you and you had a few days, and so you get it and you want to talk to people about it. I appreciate that. I really do. I think you might have something to add to the conversation as well. But I really think people who have sat on the ledge for a really long time and wondered, should I just swing right over? You have a voice in this conversation. However you have stayed alive, why ever you have stayed alive, share that with people, because it's a fucking miracle. You are a goddamn miracle. If you are listening to this and you have ever struggled with suicidal ideation, depression, or self-harm, or anything of these natures, you being here is a goddamn miracle. And we're so fucking grateful for you. I'm sure there are other people in your life who are also grateful for you. And I think one way we move forward is people like us having these conversations and saying, look, there's a lot of times when I'm actually not okay. I tried to say that without breaking in my voice, but it was not possible. I am tearing up because sometimes I'm really not okay. And that's okay. But finding the support and the people, and really all of us having these conversations, I think that it's not the solution, but I think it opens up the door for us to all come to collective and individual solutions.
Zahra, that was so well said. Thank you so much for that. I don't think that there's much I can add on to it, because I think you're absolutely right. And I do think that you know what? I do think that people like us should talk more about what keeps us alive. I do think that, because I do think it is important to actually hear from the people who are going through it themselves, versus just hear from the people who are like platitudes, or people like that ex I told you about, who like went through it, but like doesn't have it in him to like hear about it from other people or support other people through it. And so yeah, I just want to say thank you for what you shared today, and having this be the topic that we were so excited to talk about on your birthday.
Hell yeah, because if you had asked me many years ago if I thought I'd have made it to 32, I would have said no. And yeah, I'd love to say it's not even a question of whether I'll make it to 33, but like truly I'm scared of what the universe has in store for everyone all the time now. So I won't make like grand sweeping statements like that. But, I'm hoping that 32 comes around in a good way. So yeah, thank you all for letting us talk about this. And Hien for letting us have this space, and for, I don't want to say indulging me when I have these ridiculous whims, but for always being game to be emotionally vulnerable on the internet. Thank you, Hien, and for being my partner in all of this. Yeah, thank you all. And I know the holidays are fucking a nightmare all the time, and winter is a hard time. So if you're listening to this, I don't want to just drop a hotline, but 988 is the suicide hotline. And if you personally are not suicidal, but you know someone who is, call that hotline, ask them. They have actual resources. How can I support my friend? How can I help my friends? Because this isn't a problem we solve on our own. It's community and it's people and it's building support systems. So we love you. Hold everyone in your life close. Yeah, we'll see you next year.
Thank you. I love you, Zahra, and I love everyone who listens to us. So bye for now. Thank you for listening to the Thoughtful Wellness Revolution podcast. For bonus content, you can go to thoughtfulwellnessrevolution.substack.com and subscribe for $5 a month. You can also follow us on Instagram at Thoughtful Wellness Revolution to share your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe to us wherever you're listening.